Yeah, okay, whenever you're ready, Jolie.
That's going to open the episode, isn't it?
Okay, Buck, are you ready? Ready to go?
Yeah. Okay. Hello, one and all, and welcome to this week's episode of Buffy Boys, your weekly review of Buffy the Vampire Slayer from a queer, feminist, and literary perspective. I am one of your co-hosts, Joel, and with me today is my ever-faithful boyfriend, as far as I know.
Brian, hi, yeah,
That's
no, sorry, when you said ever faithful, I was like, well, that's not me. So.
You got distracted with your poker face. So we're very excited to be here today as we were talking about the second half of this two-parter, which began last week with the episode Innocence. Surprise. And this one was Innocence. I always get that wrong. And this week, we're watching the second half of Angel loses his soul and everything breaks bad, called Innocence. So Brian, do you want to kick us off by giving us the Buffy Ann summary for this episode?
Sure, yeah. So this is, Innocence. It's season 2, episode 14. It was written and directed by Joss Whedon, so it's one of those lot. And it was first aired on January the 20th, 98. And as we mentioned last week, it is the first episode on the Tuesday night, I think.
So originally it would have been aired in the same week, part 1 on the Monday and part 2 on the Tuesday.
Yeah, which would have been a great week for TV watching. Okay, so here's our Buffy Ann summary. The gypsy curse is broken by Angel's happiness and he becomes the demonic Angelus again, joining Spike and Drusilla in their apocalyptic plans. Buffy and Giles quarrel with Jenny. Willow finds out about Cordelia and Xander. Xander uses post-Halloween soldier memories to steal ordnance from the army base. Buffy blasts the judge, invincible to any weapon forged, with a rocket launcher.
Post-Halloween soldier memories is my favourite Against Me album.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
That's pretty good, thank you.
Yeah.
So very much like obviously direct continuation of last week's themes, last week's plot, but this is probably worth saying out front Joss Whedon's favourite episode of Buffy.
I think I said that last week that it was that the two of them are his favourite episode, but I actually think it's specifically this one that he thinks is the best, is Innocence.
Yeah, and I think it's obviously a lot of it's tied to Angelus. I need to get really practice on saying that properly because I'm going to be saying a lot in this episode. Angelus and his whole thing, which is a great turn. One
of the things I kept seeing around when I was reading about this episode was that people kept noting that this is the only episode told from the perspective of the big bad of a season. And I'm not sure about that, in the sense that A, I'm not sure if you could say it's actually told from Angelus's perspective, and B, like there are plenty of episodes in which are like feature loads of glory, say, or
the mayor,
loads of mayor content in different episodes.
I'm sure in season 6 there's a lot of stuff from a lot of scenes from the trio's perspective where it's not just them giving instructions, and definitely obviously Willow has a lot of her own stuff in that season. So
Willow definitely carries her own POV in those episodes with Dark Willow as well.
It's questionable, but I think the significant thing with Angelus is that Angel's kind of the only person so far in the show in some ways that could compete with Buffy for the protagonist role, like just in terms of how he's characterized. If this was a film, you could see the camera following Buffy until one point. Buffy walks out of frame and then continues with Angel in a way it wouldn't necessarily with other characters, so I think this is part of what makes him so formidable as an opponent. Is we saw with the Master in season 1 that when he was threatening, it was because he could see the framework of the world. He could quip, he could kind of invert things and break conventions both in text and kind of, without using a dirty word, metatextually, but it's something that Angel or Angelus very much is able to do as well. And actually we see this in this episode where there's a lot of bait and switches where the implied seeing, for example, is that Buffy's going to go and talk to this person next, and so Angelus turns up because he knows what's going to happen and kills that person. So he has that same agency within the text that Buffy does, which kind of makes him quite scary.
Yeah, there's a couple elements there. There's one that is the literal textual insiderness of Angel. He actually does know how the whole Scooby Gang works and what they might be doing next, because he was on the inside for so long. But then there's the other aspect, which is that Angel represents the person who's turned on you and the person who Buffy trusted and turned into a different person. One of the things actually that I think gets written about reasonably rarely around this episode is that there's a real literal textual kind of layer here, which is that Buffy is reacting to this as if it's a guy who she slept with who she found out right afterwards he's actually a bit of a jerk and he just won't call her back and he started being mean to her. And that's, I think, the real life equivalent here to some degree of what's going on here is that just Angel turns into a jerk.
Yeah, or it's as much that Angel in this kind of comparison always was a jerk, and it's that kind of shifting of focus when you realize this after the fact. But the fact that it takes so long for people to realize that there's anything, I think it's a key Buffy thing. There's not necessarily anything supernatural happening with this change of behavior. It can just be a change of behavior. And yeah, so it's definitely tied very much up with that sense of, that what happened to Buffy. Again, I don't think that we or the text is constituting virginity as this actually sacrosanct thing, but for her, it personally is an emotionally significant moment. And Angelus portrays for Angel that it wasn't. And obviously the loss of innocence, and the sense of, that she can't go back from this moment emotionally, is kind of very much tied up with that as well. And I think that sense of, what Angelus says, and I think because of the nature of the episode, and because we know all of this stuff so well, there'll probably be a lot of chronological jumping back and forth in a way. But what Angelus says about Buffy is that Buffy can't be killed by force alone. That she has to be attacked from the inside. She has to be brought down emotionally, and that's where her both greatest strengths and her greatest weaknesses are. And I would argue that almost all of the big bags in the show from this point on are people who come from the inside or have some element of undermining from the inside. Because Angel, obviously, with the mayor, the real difficulty with the mayor is Faith.
Yeah, sure.
And Faith's interaction with him.
Faith and Angel have a lot of comparisons to be drawn between them in terms of their story arc and their redemption and turning. And
obviously Faith appears later on in Angel, but they go on to have their own comic book series, Faith and Angel, because they're both seeking redemption kind of after the continuity of the show is finished. So yeah, we're 100% right there. And then with season 4, again, the ostensible danger is Agam, but it's also stuff about Professor Walsh and Riley being involved with that. And then with season 5, Glory is, compromises Tara and is kind of...
most importantly, Dawn.
Dawn is the key, all that kind of stuff. 6 is an obvious one with Willow, and then 7, literally, the first manifests as all the various people in her life. So there's always a sense of that, Buffy is confronted in this episode with a monster that is pure force, which is the Judge, and she just blows him up. Yeah. She can deal with that, but it's when she feels weakened internally, that's where her vulnerability is, literally, essentially. Yeah.
No, you're right, absolutely. Yeah, it's definitely one of the strengths of the show is that they kind of very quickly they use the first thing. The first season is basically that Buffy has to confront evil. She has to confront growing up. She has to confront her own life being threatened. And when she's over that, she's over that. She's never in fear for her own mortality again. Really, she's just ready to do whatever needs to be done. Mm. And what needs to be done gets increasingly more and more difficult. So in this season, it's killing the person she loves. When it comes to potentially killing Willow, she just won't. And sacrificing her sister, she sacrificed herself instead, and all these things. And eventually it becomes a situation where she, disperses the power, which is great. So obviously this episode opens with a really strong scene in which Angel, wanders out into the street fully clothed, as we've noted. Yeah. And the rain is washing down and washes away his soul, essentially. It's like this reverse baptism. And in that moment, a woman comes across him, and she goes to check if he's okay.
Smoking a cigarette.
And it's actually, I think, maybe just one of the strongest scenes in Buffy. It's so powerful in its imagery, because it literally the scene starts with Angel being oh shit, what's happening? Or I think he says oh no.
I think the last thing Angel says for a while is oh no.
Yeah. And then what happens is that he gets up after this this woman has asked if he's okay, and he says, I feel great. I'm not in pain. I'm not in any pain or something.
The pain's gone now.
The pain is gone now. And then he bites her and sucks the cigarette smoke from out of her neck and blows it out. A couple of things there. One is that
unpack that.
One is that I'm pretty sure she's a prostitute, just the way she's portrayed, just wandering in an alley and smoking and all these things. And also when he refers to Buffy as a pro later on in this episode, it was kind of there was hints of that there.
Well, this woman is also blonde, and it's a similar blonde to Buffy, which I thought was...
Oh, that's absolutely something I noted. She's also Buffy's stunt double.
Of course she is. I had a feeling she was going to be. I had a feeling Brian's going to tell me this episode that's her stunt double.
Yeah, no, that is her stunt double, and it's the only time you see her face in the whole show. So she very much stands in for Buffy in this scene.
And, but Angelus obviously stays shadowed, and they use a lot of imagery up until this point, they've used a lot of imagery of Angel coming out of the shadows and like, oh god, oh wait, it's just Angel and he's here to tell us our quest for this week. And now in this episode and going forward, they keep Angelus's face in the shadow in a very, very menacing way. Like it's genuinely still scary watching it now. And when he steps forward into the light, kind of ironically, is when you see that he is vamped essentially. Yeah.
One of the things that Joss Whedon notes about this episode is that the lighting used throughout it's very Lynchian, and I'd agree with that actually. It is very Lynchian. It's very like, you know, haunted and very impermeable. But like, just a couple things there is that like, first of all, it's such a sexual act. It's of him attacking this woman and using her and disposing of her essentially, and it so immediately breaks from Angel, who is a respectful, down to earth, very nice and very caring guy who really respects Buffy, to this guy who will not only like feed off this person but will turn them into a joke. You know, will quip during it and will, you know, use her to like, you know, as a like lol, I'm smoking through from her throat kind of thing. Yeah,
and obviously the gag there being that he's having a cigarette after sex.
Yes, of course.
And it's very much, you know, there's a
real meanness to the way that Angelus is portrayed.
Well, see, this is the thing, is what the brilliance of Angelus's portrayal and his character is. They talk a lot about how he is vicious and how he's an animal. You rarely actually see a lot of the actual murder or violence that he does, but what he is the secondary definition of cruelty. He's cruel not in a violent way. It's in that way where he smiles at you while saying something that devastates you.
Yeah,
he just says the perfect thing to really hit your insecurity and hurt you. You know, and doesn't care about it, and that's kind of the real cruel aspect of him.
Yeah, I'd agree. And he's also just, you know, this comes up a lot through the show or through this season, is that like he's incredibly passionate and he will hunt his person that he'll destroy the person that he's obsessed with, and then kill them. You know, and that's what he's about to do to Buffy. And this is the beginning of that, of just that like that wry smile and a, you know, murdering your friends kind of thing. David Boreanaz does such a great job in this episode, and just going forward, he's such a powerhouse in this season in the sense that he does that, like, you know, sad puppy dog, quiet angel thing so well, and then he barrels straight forward into this jocular, evil, and menacing, sexually terrifying man. You know.
Well, what David Boreanaz always did a strong turn with Angelus is that he made this very strong decision to make Angel very restrained or very muted. And Angelus is always so joyful. He's an incredibly joyful and charismatic, smiley person, and it's actually one of the things that is always a big giveaway. You know, like when she initially, I always think when she initially sees him when they go back to the apartment, and Angelus has specifically gone back with the express purpose of just fucking with her head essentially, and he's in such a great mood. I feel like that's a real giveaway. But he always portrays Angelus as just having this lust for life essentially, and one of the things that they say about Angelus as a vampire compared to other vampires is he doesn't hate. Angel doesn't hate anyone, and Angelus doesn't hate anyone. It never comes from a hatred, which is why he's never really motivated to actually destroy the world in a lot of situations. Like he obviously does do that by the end of the season, but Angelus is not insane. He's very sane, and he's very just. I always wonder, you know, because I don't think any character in Buffy ever manifests the idea that people are inherently better or chosen in the way that there aren't people who are inherently just the hero of the story. People always get their agency from decisions and from certain characteristics. And so I often wonder, what is it about Liam, about the human the Angel was, that made him such a significant, such a vicious vampire? And I think with Liam, it's very much the life he had and the energy and the enthusiasm that translated into Angelus. You know, that's the aspect that becomes twisted in the way the vampire personality traits become twisted. It's this sheer love of doing horrible, cruel things, essentially. You know.
Yeah, I'd agree. The way Liam is portrayed as just being incredibly drunk and having a lot of fun, and, you know, a complete disregard for the people around him. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
There's so much to discuss with this episode. I mean, one of the major things about the episode is just the whole process of Buffy finding out and just being totally devastated. And it's done so well. So like, first you have Buffy and Angel in that interaction where he says, "Oh, hey, how you getting on?" You know, after she's been searching for him for a day or so, and she can't find him because she woke up and he was just gone. And he's saying, you know, "Hey kid, how's it going? Yeah, that was good fun, but
Kiddo,
also,
he always says, yeah.
Also, you know, that was crap, and obviously you've never done that before, and all this stuff." And it's just genuinely mean. And when Sarah Michelle Gellar starts crying in that scene, I was like, yeah, no, like that's devastating.
Yeah, so one of the if I was to make a quilt of my favorite Buffy lines, and if it starts with, you know, "I'm only 16, Giles, I don't want to die," another one of them is when Sarah Michelle Gellar says, "Was I not good?"
Yeah,
Like, so plaintive. But the really cruel thing about that scene, it's masterfully written, and Joss Whedon has like commented before about, he often wonders like, what was the horrible part of him that made that so easy to write. He was like, this is a character who I need to put in this episode, and just came from me. Mm-hmm. But he doesn't start off being mean. He very much is like, "Oh hey, I didn't want to scare you," hugs her, kisses her very gently. It's gaslighting.
it is.
It's what he's doing. He's not trying to come out, and because if he came on too forcefully with it, it would just so obviously be like mean and hurtful. But it's just enough that she starts doubting her own sanity around it, essentially, or her own interpretation, and assumes that she's the one at fault, and like that's the real kind of like evilness of it, essentially. You know?
Yeah, it was something we talked about a lot last week, but like, you know, is Buffy judged in this episode? I mean, like from my perspective, you know, obviously the Giles doesn't judge her, and Joyce represents a non-judgmental perspective, and Willow just wants her to be okay. And I think one of the strongest lines of the episode is when Giles is like trying to like get the information out of Buffy, being like, "Oh, what happened last night?" And Willow says, "Giles, shut up."
Yeah.
And it's so unusual for that character, for Willow, to say that. It is just a moment of just like, no, our friend needs our help, and like, you know, patience here, not to be grilled.
I think it's very well crafted in how it's come kind of quite gently to a point in this series, because I think with a lot of other TV shows you can see, okay, they're building this character up, and you kind of, I can see the wheels moving here. But in this episode you have a really organic development and point of I was going to say climax, but what I was trying to say a point of convergence for Willow and Oz, for Xander and Cordelia, for Giles and Jenny, and for Angel and Buffy. They've literally done an episode where all the romantic relationships in the show
have significant
and are in reflections and refractions of each other, but you don't feel it coming. It's so genuinely developed, and all those relationships have moved at different speeds, but they've reached a harmonic point at the same time. You know,
yeah,
I think
sure. So to clarify, to basically, Cordelia and Xander are found as kissing by Willow, and then Willow gets very upset and tries to, you know, get Oz to make out with her to make Xander jealous. And Oz says, "Oh no, I'm not going to do that, because, you know, I really do want to kiss you, but, you know,
I want you to kiss me as well."
Yeah, and I don't want to make Xander jealous.
Yeah.
And like, imagine like being a person that have to be like, "Oh yeah, someone wants to kiss me," to make Xander fucking Harris jealous. Disgusting.
When Xander and Cordelia are kissing in the stacks in the library, and they pull back, and Willow's just standing there, and, you know, it's like freeze frame. You can see when Ralph Wiggum's heart is broken. You know, it's so upsetting.
It is.
But then that moment between her and Oz, you know, she's so genuinely surprised and like, grateful isn't the right word, but she realizes that there's someone who actually cares about her for her.
Yeah, sure.
And you can see her character change in that moment. You can see, and the fact that she confronts Xander and actually says to him, "You'd rather be with someone you hate than be with me," and he's still so fucking oblivious that he doesn't follow up on that or anything. Do you know? But the stuff with Oz is, you know, if you want to have her switch her attention in that way, you need to convince the audience genuinely that he is the right person for her.
Oh my god, you have said the word genuinely 3 times now. It's pronounced genuinely, Joel. Genuinely. Okay, well, this is a class issue, and I think we can take this off air. Genuinely is not. That's not how you say that word.
Okay. Well, you can, if you have any more tips on the Queen's English as we go on, please just tag in and give me your Queen's perspective.
Okay, and then the other relationship is Giles and Jenny, and what happens is that Buffy discovers that Jenny is a spy in a dream.
A dream spy.
A dream spy, and
a night warrior.
She goes and fucking grabs her by the neck in front of an entire classroom, and Giles has to stop her, and it's revealed that that Jenny is
Jen-
a spy. And then Giles, later on in the episode, basically Buffy tells Jenny to get out of a situation because she doesn't want her to be there anymore. And Giles says, she said get out.
Yeah.
And it's devastating.
I think I love this episode. I love this show. I love this arc. I think the whole thing about Jenny having been sent there to watch Buffy and Angel is the weakest part of it because it's not true.
Like, I totally agree.
It's just, I know it's fine, and I think as an animal, if we watch it, we say okay, fine, because that needs to happen because that's where we're going. But I don't think that was, even like in any of the earlier episodes, a knowing glance or something like that. But it's just
it's backward in it.
It's backwards written, exactly. And then I was quite happy to see off in this episode the character of Uncle Enyos. Uncle Gypsy Exposition, essentially.
Yeah.
But as I said, that's a good example of they set up a scene where they're like, I'll bring you to my uncle, he'll tell you everything you need to know. And then they cut to the uncle in the hotel room saying, I knew she would bring you, I'm sure you have many questions. That's actually Angelus, and he kills him. And I think that's a good example of Angelus being able to act outside how these things are meant to go.
Yeah.
And it's actually, I think, having watched all of Buffy and watched all of Angel, it's one of the few really violent things you explicitly see him do, where he writes in the uncle's blood on his hotel wall saying, was it good for you too? Yeah, it's an interesting one because I also thought, again, in this kind of gaslighting framework he has, when she says in his apartment, Angel, I love you, he doesn't say, I've never really loved you, or anything obviously meaning like that, where you could almost hear that and say, okay, well, I'm not engaging with this anymore. He says, oh, I love you too. And then doesn't mean it. Just so explicitly does not mean it.
Yeah, I know.
And that's much more hurtful.
Yeah, it's awful.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then obviously the end of the episode being that Xander comes up with a plan. He has memories from Halloween, which is a nice little callback, and like recurs through the show weirdly.
Oh, it's a great escape hatch. Just when you need something to happen, he's a soldier. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So he goes and gets, in a very odd scene, gets some a bazooka from the army base in Sunnydale, because why the fuck not? And gives it to Buffy. And
confronts the soldier, and the soldier, says some soldiery things to him to let him and Cordelia in. In the process of which he disarms the soldier to show him he's holding his rifle wrong. It's all very unbelievable, but it's all in service of.
There's a great line there where the soldier says, "You got 20 minutes, Nimrod," and Xander says, "I only need 5."
Yeah, because he's talking about implying he's going to have sex with Cordelia.
Yeah,
and there's a line that Cordelia has in that scene where she asks him, and it's not kind of in a confrontation way, but she asks, does looking at guns make you want to have sex? And he says, I'm 17, kind of everything wants me.
Looking at Lanonia makes me want to have sex.
Yeah, and I kind of felt like that wasn't there for a joke. It was almost like that's in service of something she's going to feel in an episode or two. Do you know what I mean? It was. I don't know what it was, but it seemed like she was genuinely asking him rather than it being a quip.
I think it was just lining up the linoleum joke, which I think is actually just a funny joke.
Yeah, fair enough.
But he gives this to Buffy. Buffy takes it, and she says, "Best present ever," and it's obviously a little reference to the Claddagh ring, which was the best present ever in the last episode, and has become quite upsetting. And they go to the mall, and they use the bazooka on the judge and kill him, and then Angel and Buffy fight and stuff. So that's all cool.
So obviously, and the thought that gets us there is that Angel goes back to Drew and Spike, and the judge figures out that there's no humanity left in him, and then we have this new dynamic where Angel has kind of resumed his place in the whirlwind. He's taken the leadership role. Spike has become the annoying little brother to him, and he's kind of taken possession of Drew again, kind of a bit, and kind of leading this vendetta against the Slayer. But yeah, the ending with the judge is like one of those lines, remember, up there with Lord of the Rings, I am no man, essentially, because the whole thing actually when it's coming, they hammer on it so much that he can't be killed by weapon forged. And there's a great Joss Whedon moment where she pulls out the bazooka.
First she says, "That was then," and then she gets the bazooka handed to her and she says, "This is now."
Yeah, and immediately Angel and Drew just dive off the platform, and the judge says, "What does that do?" And then gets blown up by a rocket. And what I think is a very strong moment is she's standing there in the middle of the mall holding this bazooka by herself, and all the other Scoobies are cowering around her feet behind a makeup counter, and it's very much like this is her thing. They can contribute nothing here. They just need to get out of the way.
No, you're absolutely right. One of the things there is It actually brings me to a point I was going to make, which is
Rare.
language. So in this episode, I mean, we've discussed a lot about, the language of youth and quipping and all these things, and how it indicates a power and a fluidity and an ability to interact with the world and to move through the world in a positive way. And usually the adult speak and is a way of distinguishing people who are not
with it,
and just
part
good.
of the, yeah.
And like very old-fashioned speeches, it indicates, usually a monster or an evil, the kind of like the Shakespearean speech of the master and stuff.
Yeah.
And in this episode, you get two things. One is that Angel so specifically can do the speech. He can do the youth speech, and he can weave in and out of that kind of lingo because he does have the inside track. But Buffy so specifically loses that in this episode. She becomes extremely nonverbal in the episode. Everything out of her mouth is a bunch of small grunts, no's. When she says, that about, but was I good? It's that kind of thing that in another episode, if she was of herself, she would have said something kind of funny or something, a bit like, it'd
be two lines and it would
it'd be disarming or something. And, where at the end of the scene, when her and Angel are having their first battle realistically is in that scene, is where he is like saying all these incredibly mean things to her, and she has no defenses for it. So she, in a normal Buffy episode, she'd be quipping back and forth with Angel in that scene.
Yeah.
But because she's so disarmed here, she all she can muster at the end to try to resolve it is "I love you." She's broken down into these incredibly simple speech patterns. And then when Giles is trying to get the information out of her about what happened the night before, it's she's incredibly closed-mouthed. But then by the end of the episode, Buffy has done the Buffy thing, which is that the reason that Buffy can destroy anything is that she's not going to stop.
Yeah.
Nothing can stop her. You can try to get in at her through her vulnerability, but that is why Buffy is our hero, is that she's never going to stop. She will always find a way through. She'll always find a way to get back up another time and keep fighting. So in this episode, what happens is that she picks herself back up and her speech comes back. She starts quipping again. She refers to the judge as a smurf. And, she has that interaction where she says, that was then, this is now.
Yeah.
And she's talking to Xander, saying, best birthday present ever and all these things. So, it's a really interesting episode in terms of just the dip immediately in her most vulnerable moment into a non-verbal space, and then back into this kind of youthful, quippy space, when basically the most quippy and the most youth-speaking bad guy ever confronts her.
Yeah, absolutely. I 100% agree. And I think if there's a moment in the entire 7 seasons of the show where Buffy could have been killed, it was in that moment.
I think
in their apartment. And
yeah, I think so too.
And she was completely exposed, completely defenseless. And just by the kind of the Shakespearean twist of it, essentially, is that Angelus would never have done that because he can't derive a satisfaction just from the death as from the psychological.
Yeah, and what's funny is that Angel really does try to or does generally distance himself from that youth speak. He has a very different register of tone. He's very, he has a couple of funny lines through the show, but it's usually at his expense. It's funniness. He's usually quite monosyllabic and quite quiet and quite considerate and respectful in his tone. And yeah, this is such a specific dramatic mark into him being the jocular, outspoken.
It's actually quite jarring because he gets very verbose as Angelus, and Angel is he uses words sparingly and to specific effect.
Yeah.
And I think that's a great way in terms of acting, of portraying restraint without being oh, I'm so restrained all the time.
Yeah, David Boreanaz just slips into a different character in this.
I think the only thing that's comparable to his portrayal of Angelus is David Tennant in Jessica Jones.
Sure.
It just in terms of an actor who can so strongly portray a very likable character and in some ways similar but very inverted version of that. And what I always think, you're very right about, that you can always tell when Buffy's at her weakest when she is non-verbal, and obviously the Boggy is very much about that as well. But what it reminds me of is this episode, which I will eventually look up the name of, on her 18th birthday.
The Crucimantium one.
When she finally gets her strength back and kills a vampire, she stakes him he burns up a holy water or whatever. But there's that moment where we're waiting for her quip, and she says, if I was at full strength, I'd be punning right now. And it's not actually a quip, but it's a hanging hat on it a little bit. And that was actually the moment where I realized, this is specifically a thing, that language is like a flow and a power, and it's one of her passive strengths as opposed to her active strengths.
Yeah. I will note that the other person who's amazing at doing evil characters and good characters is Melda Staunton. Melda Staunton for years in my brain was like, the lovely woman from Vera Drake.
Okay, yeah.
And she's been in loads of things where she's just a very kind woman. And she's also Dolores Umbridge, is that what I mean? Dolores Umbridge, yeah?
Jeez, watching the film, right?
Yeah, I know. But she's also Dolores Umbridge, and in that she's
yeah.
like the most hateful, disgusting woman of all time. So, and she's in Pride. She's very nice in Pride.
She is. She's great in Pride. It's a very good film.
Pride's a great movie. A couple of things there. One, we should talk about the family of vampires there, because that was fucked up as shit. Like, Angel comes back, and they actually have a really nice inbuilt in-universe way of proving that he's Angelus. In that the judge touches him and he has no humanity in him. And I'm like, oh, great, well, that proves it.
I always feel so grateful when we can skip 3 or 4 scenes of people not believing things.
I know, yeah. That's something that Buffy does a good job of. There's like, if there's ambiguity with things, they generally deal with the ambiguity pretty quickly as opposed to using that as a narrative plot.
Yeah, because I find it's used in weaker writing to pad things out. And when you know you want to get to something, like if you know you've something more interesting to
up
do,
your sleeve,
you want to get it out of the way straight away. But no, I think that basically that relationship between Drew and Angelus and Spike, it's very interesting. It's definitely probably one of the, if not the most interesting vampire relationship in the show.
Yeah, because obviously like Angelus is both of their sires. Or sorry, he's Drusilla's sire, and Drusilla's sire is Spike. And
but he's the head of the line, essentially.
Yeah, exactly. And he is considered, but he's also deeply sexual with them. So there's a weird family taboo, like incest thing going on here, because he's like, he's in the same breath he's threatening towards Spike.
Yeah.
And then like, kisses him on the forehead kind of thing.
And there's a bit there where Drew has her hand on Spike's face, and he puts his hand over her hand on his face, and it takes her hand away, could take her away with him. Mm-hmm. So there's definitely all that erosion of boundaries, but then there's also all the energy in there, the fact that he is very much Drew's abuser, and that she says, you're going to hurt Buffy first like you hurt me, and Angel says no, Angela says no one understands me the way you do, and then Drew eventually passes this on by turning William into Spike when he's at his lowest, and also specifically drawn to Spike because he was hurt romantically.
Yeah, sure.
And all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's very interesting. I think that the parallel there between this lack of boundary in this, I won't say friendship, but in this kind of collegiate unit they have, and the offense that Willow has at Xander doing something similar with Cordelia, and kind of that both upset that she wasn't good enough in her feeling at that moment for him, but that he would kind of corrupt that unit by being interested in Cordelia. So I think there's a lot of parallel there.
There's I mean the kind of the corrupting influence of sex is very present in this episode to some degree, and like they definitely represent in this episode that like really gross flippant sexuality that like the vampires do represent. And obviously that's not us, that wouldn't be a perspective that we would take. We're not going to be doing that, but like they do represent a sexual threat, I think, the vampires specifically. And did you know actually that Angel, when he comes in and says, they're like, oh, where'd you come from? And he's like, well, I went to New York and I tried to make it big, and then one day the star slipped her ankle, and I got to play the role essentially. That's him like gender swapping. In that tale, he's basically a starlet who's turned up to New York.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a really interesting one, just that like Angelus does exist in a gender fluid space to some degree, and sexually fluid space, because I mean in another episode he obviously takes on the role of the woman. In I've Only Got Eyes for You, I think is the name of the episode.
He's possessed by a ghost.
He's possessed by a woman ghost who is about to get killed.
I think the weaker vampires in the Buffy universe are the ones who, in Undeath, amplify their toxic masculinity and their machismo and all that kind of stuff,
as opposed to using their like not millennial, but they're almost like it's almost like a combative metrosexuality that Angel exists within.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think if you look at how vampires work, the weaker vampires try to break down the front door of your house. And that will only ever work so far because they can't break into your house by force. The better vampires get you to invite them inside. And it's that erosion of the center and that dissolution that is the real danger the vampires represent. Because ultimately, people are not afraid of vampires because you're walking home and you see someone with scary teeth. people are afraid of vampires because you turn around and someone who you thought was your loved one is actually now the monster in your house. It's the call is coming from inside yourself, essentially. That's the real fear that they represent, and Angel and Angelus is the epitome of that.
Agreed. But yeah, I just wanted to note that, like, you know, going forward, we should be looking at these characters and the odd sexuality they portray. One of the big things in this episode is Angel, in terms of that dream sequence, Joel. Did you think that was Angel's soul trying to communicate with Buffy? Where he says, I mean, I think there's the dream sequence happens. It's a much less inspired dream sequence than the last episode. Basically, Buffy like remembers them having sex, and it's portrayed as being lots of breathing and lots of ruffling sheets. Which the heavy breathing for the sex scene specifically, Joss Whedon had to record with the sound editor because he didn't want to ask David Boreanaz and Sarah Michelle Gellar to record noises of them panting while having sex.
Yeah,
which is, you know, fair.
Fair enough, yeah.
And then it moves into a graveyard where Angel is standing in the bright light and says, you have to know what to see. And then shows her Jenny, who like takes a black veil off her face, basically. And it's an odd one because it does feel like that's like Angel's register that he's speaking in rather than Angelus's. So, and it's delivering useful information to Buffy. And like, you know, we've seen before that like characters who are, not before, we see later on that characters who are removed from the narrative can sometimes communicate through dreams, i.e. Faith in the end of season 3 when she's in the coma. She communicates to Buffy via dreams.
Obviously, they have a shared precognizance as Slayers.
Sure.
So I think, you know, I think an important thing about Buffy, and maybe this is not a point to make when we're doing such a long form deep dive in it, but an important thing about Buffy is some things that can't be explained and shouldn't be explained.
Sure.
In the sense that there's an aspect of, I think the dreams will always be there as not a narrative device, but as to represent the weird and
an expression.
Yeah, an expression and to represent the metaphorical, which is no less present or actual than the physical or the literal.
Sure.
So could that be Buffy's intuition? Could it be Angel's human soul? Could it be some combination of the two? I think yes to all of them, but I think it is 100% not. I don't think it's Angelus.
No.
Or even a fear of Angelus or anything like that. And it's obviously the fact that it's a scene that takes place entirely in the daytime,
where he would
in
be
the sunlight, where he would be, and
it seems to be her that they're burying, I would suggest.
See, I would assume that, but it's actually quite unusual in a dream sequence for Buffy because you get very little detail. Jenny's there, Angel's there, Buffy's
there.
Very
brief dream sequence.
Yes, there might be a funeral, and there are some mourners in the background who are out of frame. Yeah. But it's quite closely cropped, you know, and again, it is to get her to the point of, as you mentioned, bursting into computer class and like pinning Jenny to the desk by her neck. It's very intense. We
should look at Giles in this episode. He's a great arc in this episode. So he goes from kind of not being quite oblivious to Buffy in terms of like what she's experienced here, and kind of like being a bit overbearing and with trying to get information out of her, and then essentially siding with her 100% as soon as he finds out what's happened.
Yeah,
and besieging the person he loves for Buffy. You know, when he tells Jenny to get out, it's done with total disdain and in total solidarity with Buffy, because he doesn't feel betrayed. He feels betrayed for Buffy, I think.
Yeah, we see there's a lot of emotional or there's a lot of bartering that happens with some characters in Buffy. There is, and it's why Buffy always wins ultimately, because there's always with a lot of the big bads, there's always a compromise that they will give up what they want for something if they can trade off, and there's a lot of that trading that happens. But as you pointed out, Buffy won't stop because there's a simple algebra for her, and it's difficult to get there, and it costs her a lot. But she can't afford to not do the thing that she needs to do. It's not something she can compute. And with Giles, there's obviously a genuine affection he has for Jenny. I don't think that's an easy thing for him to do. But the math of his relationship with Jenny compared to what he feels for both Buffy, his surrogate daughter, and also his Slayer, and that triple bond, it just doesn't equate. And I think it's why they're quite similar in some ways. I think that's why that relationship works really well, because they're very different ages and disparate characterizations, but there's a similarity between Giles and Buffy that just isn't between the other characters. And you have 3 kinds of support that Buffy gets in this episode. You have the fully cognizant support she gets from Willow, for example. Yep. Someone who both knows and kind of understands. And then you have Giles, who can't relate. He's not on the level with her, but he understands what happens, and he appreciates, and he knows that he doesn't need to get everything to give everything.
Yeah.
And then there's Joyce, who has no idea what's going on,
and offers her support regardless.
But like knows that she needs to be supported.
Yeah. So and I think the most important scene from this episode for me, and the one that had me fucking crying on the couch, which I didn't see coming, I might just be tired, is Giles talking to Buffy in the car.
Can I do the line?
I'm gonna get you to do the line. Go on.
Okay, because it's just up there.
It's great writing.
So I have the script open. So Buffy says this is all my fault, and I think what's really sad about it is there's not really a point that anyone says it's her fault before
Except for literally Jenny does.
No, but there's not a point that someone says it's her fault before she assumes it's her fault.
Oh, sure.
She just in a really. I think it's important to look at this experience. It's an individual experience, it's a Slayer's experience, but it's also a woman's experience. And a lot of the energy in this isn't things that necessarily happened to her or told to her by people near her, but with the same force of conviction is stuff that society imposed on women. And she comes out of the situation with a gut understanding, in her view, that it had been her fault, that she had done something wrong, that she wasn't good, and now everyone suffered because of this wrong thing she did with her body. And that's unfortunately what's happening. So she says that this is all my fault. Giles says, I don't believe it is, and then she starts, she's close to crying, and Giles says, you want me to wag my finger at you and tell you acted rashly? You did, and I can, but I know you loved him, and he's proven more than once that he loved you. You couldn't have known what would happen. The coming months are going to be very hard, I suspect, on all of us, but if you're looking for guilt, Buffy, I'm not your man. All you will have from me is my support and my respect. And the script says, she says nothing, spilling eloquent tears.
There's a couple of nice script moments from this episode. Apparently, when they were walking past the soldiers, the script specifically said, they walk past a group of soldiers. They say nothing because they are extras.
That's very good. But no, like the thing with Giles, and I'm careful that we don't overpraise Giles for this, because there's not a lot to ask, but unfortunately it is what sets him apart. He's just decent, and he respects her.
Yeah.
And he sees her as a person, and she very quickly proves both her humanity and her competency, and because she doesn't disprove that, he continues to support her. And it's as simple as that for him. And unfortunately, or not unfortunately, I don't know if that's what I mean, but with Rupert Giles, the reason why he can do that today is what's built into his character is he's had to suffer a lot, and he's had to lose a lot of his privilege. He's had his own trauma. He has kind of been broken down and reconstituted in a way that he can be the irony with Giles is he's presented as such an old-fashioned person, but really he's the modern man. He's the reconstructed man, a man who can look at his component parts and take the best part of it and go forward and be there, be exactly who Buffy needs him to be. But the core thing is that all, and you could have him in a different show saying disappointed things to her, being the disappointed father. And maybe,
or imagine I can see another writer saying, what would be a strong thing to say here would be like Buffy saying Giles and him saying stop, I don't want to talk to you right now, or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. Or
and being the disappointed father,
conflict and all this kind of stuff. Instead, in the same way that Joss Whedon doesn't waste time on trying to convince us that Angelus is evil, he doesn't waste time on personal conflict that isn't true.
Yeah.
And him saying, I will support you, I will respect you, and no, it's not going to be easy. It is just incredibly powerful, incredibly valuable.
It really is. And that kind of brings us to Joyce, because the next scene after that is Buffy and Joyce sitting in their front room. And for my money's worth, this is one of the best scenes of this show.
Oh, really? Okay, I'm interested to hear about this.
So, it's the two of them. There's a couple of very notable points. One is that they are both wearing white for the most part, even though they're white socks and everything. So they both represent that kind of state that Buffy existed in the beginning of the of Surprise, which is that kind of like virginal, white, pure space. And them both turning up in white here for me signifies that, what that white represented wasn't a virginal purity. It was like a purity of spirit and a purity of intention, because they both in this scene represent supportive and engaged and together people. For one thing, Joyce asks Buffy how her birthday was, and she says, did you have fun? And Buffy just says, I got older. And Joyce says the thing that Buffy desperately needs to hear, which is that she says, you look the same to me. And it's that like saying, you know, you're still the same person and you haven't changed, you haven't done something wrong. It's so important, and it is the weight of this show is that is the ultimate point of this whole exercise, is that Buffy isn't judged by the characters around her, and she's not, you know, her actions have had bad consequences that she couldn't have foreseen, and the people around her still love and support her, and that's important. And I have to imagine if you're a girl in the 90s, in 98, and maybe you had sex for the first time like 2 weeks ago, and you'd feel like you couldn't talk to anyone about it, and, you know, you feel like your dad might be looking at you a different way, watching this might be actually really, really nice and really give you a good feeling. But yeah, I think they're them wearing white in this really represents that. And then the incredibly weighted image is Joyce lights a candle for Buffy on a couple of cupcakes that they're going to have for her birthday because they haven't celebrated together yet. And Joyce says, you know, do you want to wish for something? And Buffy just says, just let it burn. Yeah. And it's incredibly upsetting. It's, you know, like a child, like a 17-year-old saying, you know, I don't have anything I want to wish for because it's too hard to try to wish for something right now because I'm so...
To want.
Exactly, because I can't have what I want. I can't get there. And, you know, like, what does that, you know, you have to look at what that, like, you know, the candle represents. There's a couple of things, you know, it's one of the things I read was that, like, you know, it calls back all the first sin imagery in the sense that it's flame often represents knowledge, and, you know, obtaining knowledge and letting that burn out is very reminiscent of that.
The Promethean ideal and all that. Yeah.
Sure, flame obviously represents passion in so many situations, you know, and passion is kind of what's, you know, brought Buffy to this point, and also it's going to be such a specific theme going forward. And then, I mean, like, obviously there's just a very simple thing of, like, you know, it's the passage of time, you know, it's this thing burning out and just, like, letting it go and just letting time kind of heal it. Yeah. And ultimately, like, it's letting a light go out, and it's like letting go of hope to some degree, which is it's really sad.
Buffy says when Joyce asks, what did you do for your birthday, she says, I got older.
Yeah, I said that a minute ago, Joel.
Did you? Sorry, I didn't catch that, but I was just
rude.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch it.
No, you're fine.
But the last line of the script for that scene is the candle flickers bravely in the dark.
Oh, jeepers.
Yeah.
So another really important thing to note here is that, like, you have to look at Joyce as a character in this scene, and the song that's playing in the background is an old 1930s-ish black and white romance.
Yeah.
I can't remember which one it was. I've read some things about people trying to interpret the content of that and the actors being known for XYZ thing and whatever.
I think it's really just that this is like a stylized romance that she's watching to comfort herself, because that's not what her life is actually like.
Absolutely. But, you know, the two of them sitting on the couch together, they've both lost, you know, the person they love. You know, I'm not talking about Ted. I'm talking about, like, you know, about
Ted
Hank.
The murderer is still out there somewhere.
Hank Summer is, like, you know, Joyce has lost the love of her life as well. You know, you know, she's recently divorced, and Buffy. They're in solidarity there together, and they both represent that, you know, they're still trucking and they're still there. Yeah.
Just a single mother and her dog are sitting on the couch having a couple of cupcakes because she didn't have time to get a cake for her, and just trying to have a nice moment together. And I said to you, like, they have the curtains drawn in this scene, and it's quite a comfortable moment. And, you know, I often look at some of the scenes Buffy does, and how she's often told to go to class and to do the thing. And, you know, as, you know, someone who has a lot of experience with anxiety, as I'm sure a lot of people do, like...
What?
Yeah, I know. Shocker. But I look at this, and I often think there's great strength in the fact that she does just continue to try and do normal things when there's other things preoccupying her, like really devastating things. She still maintains her life and finds comfort where she can. And I think with a lot of the language she uses, a lot of the Buffyisms, finds humor and normality and connection where she can, whereas it's not always easy. And I think it's really that stuff that I think makes Buffy very inspiring, and, you know, why people connect with her so much, because she just keeps going.
Sure does. Do you have any other major points? Because I have one last big point that I want to discuss.
Sure.
Not Buffy bits. Like, we can deal with Buffy bits at the end.
Yeah. Let me have a look, and I'll see if I have any other in my notes. Yeah. I suppose the only other thing to mention is for the moment, is that it's a very important episode in terms of the lore, in terms of obviously a vampire's work. We get a real introduction properly to Angelus here, and as I mentioned before, there'll be a lot of complications going forward, and how much is Angel Angelus, how much is Angel still present here, where does Angel's soul go, does it still exist, etc., all that kind of stuff. I've always found that the thing about the curse of the gypsies is that if he has one moment of happiness, he'll lose it. was like a really
badly thought out
really
thing.
badly thought out. And there's an extensive cut scene, deleted scene of this episode with Uncle Enios before Angelus kills him, where they basically try to explain this, and he's saying, oh well, if you have any happiness, you're not suffering and you're not worthy of the human soul we put on you. And to be honest, I think one of the reasons it was cut is it's a lot of talking. I kind of still doesn't explain it very well for me. It's been one of these things that we accept that's how it works, that how Angel's curse works, but the justification for it, I think, has always been a little bit weak.
Yeah, and it doesn't. I'm like, they don't need an explanation, so I'm glad that they cut out like a large amount of it. Is that like it's just not necessary? It's and like realistically, like what's happened here is that Joss Whedon has said at multiple points that the reason that Angel gets his soul back is because he wanted to avoid the Sam and Diane issue, which is that once you get your people, your main characters together, and they, you know, have that moment of, oh, will they, won't they, they did, that it's sudden, like, quality usually drops very quickly.
Yeah,
and
keeps it fresh.
It keeps it fresh, and it, like, you know, what he said about it as well is that what people need is not what they want. Yeah. They wanted Angel and Buffy to be together, but for the show to be good, they had to not be together. Yeah,
but I think it's an important one to not navel gaze in terms of getting too much into the minutiae of Buffy. And I may have mentioned this before, but I always think of Highlander. I've said this to you on multiple occasions, that when asked where the immortals in Highlander come from, Sean Connery's older character says, you know, where do the stars come from? Are they just pinpricks in the sky that let the light in at night? What matters is that we're here. We've always been here. And I always hold it up as an example of like, yeah, sometimes that's all you need to know, and there's nothing interesting to be said about kind of finding out the exact what of what. And definitely what people think they want to know about characters isn't necessarily what they need to know for a good story. But yeah, it's an interesting one. Obviously, all the stuff with the judge and how it's set up as a big bag and just kind of blowing apart and kind of move aside in terms of, I think that's a moving aside of the traditional supernatural enemy as being the actual big bad into all the personal enemies going forward. And yeah, it's just very interesting. I think it's going to give us a lot to unpack in terms of what it actually means to be a vampire slayer, which I think we kind of really zone in on for the rest of the season.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so my last point is, what is the innocence of the episode title? Because obviously what we might have a tendency to draw from this is that Buffy has lost her innocence, that she has had a fall from grace, that she has had a fall a la, you know, the Garden of Eden, that she has, you know,
her innocence being her virginity, literally.
Her virginity and her, it's very important to note, no one in this episode refers to her as having lost her virginity.
That's true. That's a very good point, yeah.
And, you know, what I would say is that, like, I think what Joss Whedon said is a couple of points is that in this episode, he kind of, not only is like some innocence lost, but like this is Buffy still in a state of innocence. You know, she hasn't lost something important, or you know, at her core, because of this, that she does still exist in that space. Actually, I'll get a quote for you. He said, Whedon says, "Innocence isn't lost. That Buffy is in this sense innocent, that she hasn't lost anything of herself, even though she has gone through a painful maturing process, and that's why her mom says, 'You don't look any different to me,' as a way of stating that she's still the same good person that she was." That's an incredibly meandering quote, but essentially, like, she is the same person at the end. She's still strong, and, you know, losing her virginity in the metaphor of this episode isn't this, you know, life altering thing, or well, it is, but it's not.
Innocence isn't something that necessarily has to be lost. I think we think of innocence and almost immediately think of lost innocence.
Sure, of course.
And yeah, I think I 100% agree with you. It's carried forward until the whole thing about how Buffy can't kill Ben in season 5, so Giles has to, is she has that Steve Rogers quality, and it makes her strong, and it also makes her oblivious to certain things. But that innocence is something that can resist a blow. There's a lot of conversation in this episode about purity. They talk about when Angelus returns to the judge that he's now pure, clean, he's been cleansed. And that, again, innocence isn't something that is untarnished necessarily. Yeah. It's not fragile, and I think it's writing against the common understanding that innocence is an exotic bird that needs to be caged and it can be injured so easily. And Buffy very much demonstrates that, you know, she cannot be injured easily.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, it's a complex metaphor. You know what I feel like? We spend so long in these episodes talking about metaphor and symbolism and stuff, and I don't think we talk enough about bazookas. Just because, there's an episode of Buffy where she's standing on a makeup counter and she has a fucking RPG launcher, as you put it, and she's quipping away. Like, that should really be the focus of our discussion more often, I think. Okay, let's move into the dusting. Do you have any Buffy bits, Joel, you want to throw out there?
I do. I'm just going to say it escalates to she eventually fills a high school with, I think, it's a TNT and blows it up. And
yeah, that's true. This is the rocket launcher that she uses to try to kill Principal Wood in season 7, right?
Yes, it is. It's the same one. Yeah. For like such a beautiful and nuanced and interesting show. A lot of explosions.
Yeah, it's so true.
Like the end of season 1, they blow up the building.
Which building?
So they have offices in. They're doing their detective agency out of things. Season one.
Angel. You didn't say Angel. I don't think.
I think I did.
But, okay, sorry.
It was in Angel anyway, and then obviously at the end of something there, they blow up the entire town and drop it into a sinkhole. But yeah, so let's have a look at the Buffy bits.
This is the first fight between Buffy and Angel.
It is, and it's a good fight. I actually think it's a well choreographed fight.
She kicks him in the balls.
She does literally just wallop him in the nuts. It's an oddly Lauren Hardy moment, you know?
Yeah, true.
And they have a fight in the fire extinguishers going off in the lobby of a movie theater. There's this whole, Americana thing going on. It's very strong halogen lights, California. I think it's a real juxtaposition. There is a really odd line from Xander where he says that he was waiting at the bus station on could try and see if vampire things were happening. He says a £400 wino offer to wash my hair, which is just like a really bizarre non sequitur that kind of took me off guard.
Yeah, me too.
I think I'm looking forward to talking more about how when Angelus pretends to be Angel or pastiches Angel, and similarly earlier in this season we had Angel pretending to be Angelus in Schoolheart, but when Angelus says that wherever there's evil in the night, wherever there's dark forces to be fought, Spike, you look over your shoulder, I'll be there. And he's obviously taking the piss out of Angel, but that whole Dark Defender thing is the thing that Angel continues to try and do for like the next 10 years.
Yeah, that's true.
And I really enjoy having Angel, he has like grappling hooks and everything for like 2 episodes, and he's like, this isn't working, I know what I'm trying to do here. It's very funny. Willow losing her temper, I think there's generally very strong character moments, maybe slightly buried in an episode that's otherwise very Angel and Buffy focused, but sure. She has a really strong arc over the course of the show, and I really believe that she's struggled for herself and kind of developed her worth here. So
the rocket launcher, apparently what they're going to do originally was have a tank come in at that point and blow up the mall, but it was too expensive, so they couldn't do that.
Yeah, fair enough. And I read as well that there's people commenting on the fact that the rocket explodes slightly before it hits the judge, and it's because they needed to mask the fact that what actually happened was they fired something at a dummy which bounced off onto the floor. So they had to CGI in the explosion slightly beforehand.
Apparently at one point when Sarah Michelle Gellar had a crying scene, so I'm not sure if this is referring to the crying scene after the interaction between her and Angel, or the one in her bedroom where she's just sobbing.
I would imagine when she's sobbing in her bedroom. That would be my guess.
So apparently they had to stop filming for 25 minutes because she was just distraught.
Yeah.
Fair.
Otherwise, fashion in the episode was particularly bad, and there was a lot of Willow wearing jumpers with kind of 8-bit Looney Tunes characters on it or something.
At one point Willow's wearing like the biggest, weirdest like chinchilla coat of all time when she's in the van with Oz.
She looks like she's wearing nothing under it.
Yeah, it was really weird.
It actually made me think of that episode where she had a date with him and she dresses just really like inappropriate for her style. She dressed big like red velvety dress or something. Yeah. Xander was wearing a shirt which was probably 4XL underneath a woolen jumper. Yeah. And Giles was also just wearing like a completely shapeless tube of a tie that was just like, it was just like a roll of like crushed red fabric. It just wasn't a good look. Yeah. Angel, or maybe I'm being Angelus, I think that there's definitely some scenes where they overdid his pale makeup. Yeah, sure. And I do feel that they often make him much whiter when they're trying to make it more obvious that he's a vampire. There's something different about him. But he also
just didn't need to be wearing those leather pants like awful.
No, because they're not even like, they're very pleathery. Yeah. They're very, I think it's funny how much they rag on people who are kind of doing the Vampire the Masquerade, pretending to be into like the Children of the Night, but sometimes they dress very cosplay as vampires.
Yeah, they do.
And they had a zoom in on the start of the episode where Drew had red nails and acrylic white French tips that were just not flattering at all.
She's also wearing very red heels at the end of the episode when she's running away from the explosion, which I thought was kind of funny.
But I think that's it for me, probably.
Cool. And death count, what do we have for this episode?
There was Buffy's stunt double.
Yeah, sure.
Died. Uncle Engels.
He sure did.
Engels Calderash.
That man got sapped at the mall.
Yeah, so the judge burns a man, and then while he's burning them, everyone in the background very obligingly freeze framed while they painted him out frame by frame. The judge was blown to pieces by a rocket launcher, and obviously it's ambiguous whether he is dead, but he is disabled.
And I think they've scattered his pieces anyway, so that's good.
He's written out, but that's it. And obviously Buffy's Innocence dies as well, as we discussed.
Of course. Okay, and what do you think your rating is going to be out of 10, Joel?
I think 10 out of 10 bruised vampire testicles.
Oh, it's beautiful, yeah. So tell me why.
I think this two-parter is an amazing piece of television. I think it speaks to... It's televisual, specifically. It's not film-like. It shouldn't try to be like a film. It's anecdotal, as we said in the last episode, of what the whole show is. It has important... things to say emotionally and culturally, even at 20 years distance. It has strong performances from across the cast. It is fun to watch. It's exciting. I know everything is going to happen, and I still think that where Angelus comes out of the darkness and bites that woman is one of the greatest twists in history.
It's so good.
Such a strong moment. And I just think it's it made me feel alive to watch it. I think it's why we get involved with these characters. And I think I've seen so many things in the last 20 years that I've tried to recapture some of the magic of this two-parter. I
agree. Yeah, I'd probably give it 8.7 man toys out of 10, I'd say. No, I'm just kidding. I would give it a solid 10. If I could give it a 10.2, I probably would. Yeah. It's super fucking good. Man toys though. Man toys. That's my joke.
Man toys.
Yeah, that's what Xander refers to all the armor as. Oh,
he does. He does refer to it as man toys. Gross.
Yeah.
I think whenever I give anything a 10, I often remember that was it Super Mario Galaxy? Is that the game?
I think you actually referred to this on the podcast.
I probably did, but I think I'll reiterate it, because if I don't remember it, maybe the people who listen don't remember it. But that when the Super Mario Galaxy game came out, a load of publications gave it a 10 out of 10, and people are like, you can't give something a 10 because that means it's perfect and there's no flaws. And it's like, no, it doesn't mean that it's completely without flaw or criticism, but it means it's the best it could be.
Yeah.
I think this is the best it could be.
Yeah, no, it's really fucking good.
It's the proof. It's the proof of concept. It's the proof of why Buffy matters is these two episodes, because in some ways, like, you need to watch the show and follow the journey to really get it, but that doesn't mean it's inaccessible. I think you could probably take these two episodes out with the right context, and it's kind of all there.
Agreed. Yeah, it's really fucking good.
Yeah.
Okay. Like wrap us up there, Joel. Finish us up. Do it.
Okay. Bye. So next week we will be watching Phases.
I cannot remember. Is it Phases or is it Lovers, or not Lovers Walk?
It's Phases.
Oh, is it? Okay,
yeah. Which is, if I remember correctly, is a werewolfy episode, I'm assuming.
It is, yeah. Which is a nice light one for...
Yeah, absolutely. Kind of a palate cleanser. Get back to the old banter. That's actually something interesting, which when we're looking at the sexuality of these vampires going forward, when Spike and Drusilla mention that Angelus is back in the fold and that he's no longer ensouled, which is a very specific Buffy word which doesn't exist anywhere else. He says, I was just going through a phase and it's gone now, so we'll come back to that one.
Yeah, let's. So yeah, Phases, which is going to be good fun and a bit lighter.
Yeah, but otherwise, thanks for listening. If you enjoyed it, tell your friends, tell your frozen yogurt salesman, and we will be very happy to welcome you all back next week for next episode of Buffy Boys. I don't know what, I feel like something else I meant to say. Well, I forgot. How does the show work?
Well, you see, at the end of the episode, you say thank you. For some reason, every word is after every time.
You're cruel.
I'm sorry this episode has gone on for so long. Go follow us on Twitter, maybe? I don't know. Why not?
Follow us on Twitter. I never feel bad about episodes of podcasts going long when they have something to say.
Sure.
Because people don't listen to podcasts all in one go necessarily.
Sometimes they do.
Sometimes they do. And sometimes, anyway. the format supports it. You're here for this shit. If you're listening to a Buffy podcast, I think you're happy to talk about this episode and listen to this episode.
Absolutely.
So thanks very much for engaging. Hope there's something interesting in there. Tell your friends. We'd be happy to hear everyone's opinions on this episode, even if they're wrong. And Brian will tell them so.
Yeah, I will.
So we will see you next week on Buffy Boys.
Exactly. Goodbye.